Go for the poles and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
What's up, everybody, and welcome in to the Legal Hands to the Face show with Bill Colarulo. A lot to talk about tonight. The Philadelphia Eagles season, man, it's over, but the news has not stopped. A lot to talk about. Nick Sirianni, is he safe? The offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator. A story about our quarterback, Jalen Hurts, today. A little damning of him, not only for his play on the field, but his leadership. So we have to get into all of it tonight on the Legal Hands to the Face show. And we're going to be joined later by the one and only Derrick Gunn. Gunner's going to join the show. So he tweeted out today that all signs are pointing towards Brian Johnson not returning. So I want to talk to him about that, see what he knows. He always has his finger on the pulse of this Eagles organization. So we're going to talk to Gunner later on in the show. But we are live everywhere right now. We are streaming live on the Legal Hands to the Face YouTube channel, Instagram channel, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. We're also being simulcast on the JAKIB Sports network across all their platforms. So be sure to hit that like button, hit that share button. Make sure you're subscribed or following me everywhere. And if you can, share it with your friends. The more Eagles fans we could reach, the better, because even though the season is over, there is so much to talk about with this Eagles team and this Eagles organization. And we're going to take this audio and upload it to all your favorite podcast platforms. So if you are listening to the audio, be sure to leave us a review wherever you get your podcast. Really helps us reach more Eagles fans. But let's jump into it, guys, because there is a ton to talk about. I see some of the Legal Hands to the Face crew checking in the chat. Billy Ray, Timmy Walker, Little Griffith, Franny, Steve, Jerry P, Thunderbird. I see all of you. I see you guys on Instagram. I see you on TikTok. Appreciate you all being here. But I first want to talk about Nick Sirianni, because the last time we had a Legal Hands to the Face show, because this is a weekly show, we were not even 24 hours removed from that devastating, embarrassing loss down in Tampa Bay. And I was angry. And I kind of let the emotions get the best of me, because I said Nick Sirianni should be fired. I didn't think he would be. Last week on the show, I said I think they will bring him back, but if it was up to me, I wouldn't do it. And if you guys follow my Instagram or here on TikTok, or you follow my other show, which is a daily show, after my emotions subsided, and after I took a step back and I looked at the entire picture, I said that would have been a knee-jerk reaction. When I look at the entire picture, I'm okay with them bringing Nick Sirianni back. And here is the reason why. Because as angry as I was and as frustrated as I was with what we saw the last few weeks of the season, and especially what we saw in Week 18 against the Giants, and in that wild card matchup against the Tampa Bay Bucs, he deserves to come back for another season. And just hear me out. Some of you guys have heard this before. If you follow me on Instagram, you've seen my videos. If you follow my other show. But hear me out on why Sirianni deserves to come back. No coach in the history of the National Football League, none, has ever gone to a Super Bowl, lost both his offensive coordinator, his defensive coordinator, and made it any farther than the divisional round in the playoffs. In fact, it's only happened twice in the history of the Super Bowl that any coach has ever gone to a Super Bowl and lost both his offensive and defensive coordinator. It happened in 2005 with the New England Patriots, who were coached by Bill Belichick and quarterbacked by Tom Brady. They went 10-6, couldn't get past the divisional round. It happened in 1995 with the San Francisco 49ers, head coach George Seifert and Hall of Fame quarterback Steve Young. They went 11-5, couldn't get out of the divisional round. So when we talk about the Super Bowl hangover that everybody was concerned about in the offseason, I really think we are ignoring that when we look at Nick Sirianni this year. It wasn't good enough. Don't get me wrong. Nick Sirianni needs to be better. But I do think it would have been a knee-jerk reaction as I allow my emotions to calm down. And when you look at all of the evidence, remember my legal background, when you look at all of the evidence here, he deserves to come back for another season. And I see people in the chat talking about, but 10-1, it was an epic collapse. Would your opinion have changed if this team was 5-6 or 6-5 after 11 games? Because let's be honest, when we go back and now we have the luxury of hindsight being 2020, this team was trying to tell us who they were all season. This was not a 10-1 football team. They could have very easily been 5-6, 6-5. They weren't very good. They gave up 300 damn yards to Mac Jones in week 1. So I know everyone's argument is 10-1, epic collapse. They were not a 10-1 football team. They could have very easily been 5-6. Would your opinion have changed then? Would you have said Nick Sirianni deserves another shot then? And not only has there never been a coach to go to a Super Bowl, lose both coordinators, and get out of the divisional round, listen to some of these other things. Nick Sirianni, third coach ever to start consecutive seasons 10-1 or better, joining Tony Dungy and the Indianapolis Colts, who had Peyton Manning as their quarterback, joining Don Shula and the undefeated 72 Dolphins, who followed it up the next year in 73. Through the first 45 games of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts' career, 34-11. That's fifth best ever. And listen to the 4 other names who have a better first 45 games together than Sirianni and Hurts. Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers. John Fox and Peyton Manning. Don Shula and Dan Marino. And Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. That's why I'm saying this guy deserves another shot. I know it wasn't pretty down the stretch. I know everybody wants to call him a clown. A lot of people want to say he doesn't do anything. You don't win 34 out of 45 games if you're a clown. Yes, it was ugly down the stretch, but we can't ignore this stuff. And when we talk about the Super Bowl hangover, we were all worried about it in the offseason. No NFC team has lost a Super Bowl and got back the following year in 50 years. You got to go all the way back to the 1973 Minnesota Vikings. There's only been 6 coaches in the history of the NFL who have been able to lose a Super Bowl and get back the next year. And listen to these names. Tom Landry and the 71 Cowboys. Don Shula and the perfect 72 Dolphins. Bud Grant and the 73 Vikings, the last NFC team to do it. Dan Reeves and the 86 Broncos. Marv Levy and the 90s Buffalo Bills teams that lost every Super Bowl they got to. And then 2018, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. So when I take a look at this whole picture, when you let the emotions subside, are we really going to fire a guy because he wasn't able to do something that only 6 legendary coaches were ever able to do? And guess what? None of those 6 lost both coordinators. None of them. and you look at Nick Sirianni, the guy we want to call a clown, the guy we want to say is nothing but a cheerleader, has a regular season winning percentage of .667. It's the highest winning percentage of any active coach outside of Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. He's the only Eagles coach to lead his team to the playoffs in his first 3 seasons. And guys, trust me, I'm not a Nick Sirianni cheerleader right now. What I'm just trying to tell you is when you look at the entire picture, we can't ignore all of this stuff. But the final factor for me, the final reason why I calmed down and said they should bring this guy back is what you heard from the veterans. What you heard from Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey. And I get it. Players aren't going to throw their coach under the bus. But these guys didn't just say, yeah, he's our coach. They went to bat for him. Fletcher Cox called Jeff McClain a clown for even asking the question. You can't ignore all this stuff, guys. You can't. And if you're a head coaching candidate, how would you view the Philadelphia Eagles as a destination if less than 1 year after going to a Super Bowl, less than 1 year after having pretty much an historic season in Philadelphia Eagles franchise history, less than 1 year from being a half away from winning a Super Bowl to say, yeah, you're gone. Yeah, you lost both coordinators, and the defense lacked personnel, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, you're gone. You can't do it. And trust me, I was just as angry as everybody else. But when you look at everything, you can't do it. Especially if you consider who was the person to make the decision to move on from Sean Desai with only 4 games left. If you believe, like I believe, that decision came from up top, that decision came from Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, then how do you hold Nick Sirianni accountable for what was the nail in the coffin of this season? Because that day, when they moved on from Sean Desai and switched things over to Matt Patricia, that was the nail in the coffin. And if that decision truly came from up top, which I think it did, that's even more reason why Sirianni deserves another shot. And I know a lot of people's argument, he doesn't call plays. There are a lot of CEO-type coaches in the NFL who've had a lot of success. One of them's playing in the AFC Championship that we know well. John Harbaugh doesn't call plays, was a special teams coach for the Eagles, CEO coach. Mike Tomlin, a lot of success with the Steelers, CEO coach. Dan Campbell in Detroit playing in the NFC Championship game, doesn't call plays, CEO coach. So it can be done if they get the right coordinators in here. And that's what we have to talk about. Because as much as I'm okay bringing Sirianni back, don't sell me on bringing back these coordinators. And thank God it appears the news was delivered today that Brian Johnson, in addition to Sean Desai, are both out. That, to me, after I let all of the dust settle and all of the emotions subside from what happened at the end of this season, that's the best case scenario, in my opinion. You run it back with Sirianni, but you get new coordinators in here, new offensive mind, a new defensive play caller. And we'll talk to Derrick Gunn later on in the show about what's going on in that search. But I want to talk about Howie Roseman for a second, because I post videos all day long on my Instagram, my Twitter, my TikTok. Make sure you are following. Tell you that every week. But I posted some videos talking about the culpability of Howie Roseman when looking at that defense, when looking at the personnel on the defensive side of the football. That wasn't on Nick Sirianni. To me, that wasn't even on Sean Desai or Matt Patricia. It was on the lack of personnel on the defensive side of the football. And I'm not calling for Howie Roseman to lose his job. I do think Howie Roseman can be a very good general manager in this league. But if you're going to give Howie Roseman credit when he deserves it, then you also have to let him know when he makes mistakes. And Howie Roseman had a horrible offseason. We can go back and we can look at the offseason that Howie Roseman had. And almost every single move he made on the defensive side of the ball was a misstep. But for whatever reason, you can't ridicule Howie Roseman anymore with some of you fans. I have people attacking me on Instagram and Twitter. How dare I question Howie Roseman? And I see you guys in the chat already want to blame everything on Nick Sirianni. Let's take a look at that defense, and you tell me how Howie Roseman should not share in the culpability of what you saw on the defensive side of the football. First of all, we could start all the way back in 2019 because you talk about the draft. And I know a lot of people's argument is, well, Howie Roseman couldn't pay everybody on the defense because all their money's invested on offense. Well, guess what? You know how you do that in the NFL? You know how you do that under a salary cap? Is you have young players that you drafted who are still on their 4-year rookie deals. And if you draft them in the second round or the third round or the fourth round and you hit on a defensive player, you have them on a really affordable contract for 4 seasons. So let's go back to 2019. Howie Roseman drafted Sharif Miller. He's out of the NFL. 2020, he drafted linebacker Davion Taylor, out of the NFL. Safety Kavon Wallace on the Tennessee Titans. Linebacker Sean Bradley, a special teamer, on IR. Defensive end Casey Toohill on the Commanders. So now we're 0 for 2. Let's go to 2021. He drafted Milton Williams. Love that pick. He can draft D tackles. He can't draft anything else. Cornerback Zach McPherson. Who knows what we have in him on IR this year? Defensive tackle Marlon Tupelotu. Gives you some reps, but he's a D tackle. Outside of that, there's nobody. Defensive end Teron Jackson, practice squad. Linebacker Jacoby Stevens, out of the league. Defensive end Patrick Johnson gave you nothing this year. You go to 2022. Defensive tackle Jordan Davis. There's a theme here. There's D tackles who can contribute. Now, we could debate whether or not Jordan Davis is, in fact, worthy of that first-round pick. But even if you give him Jordan Davis, linebacker Nakobe Dean, IR. Defensive end Kyron Johnson on the Steelers. This is why this defense is in the predicament it is in. There are not enough young talents on their second year, third year, fourth year. Not talking about this rookie class. I still have hopes that Jalen Carter's a stud. I have hopes that Sidney Brown's going to be a good player. But you can't rely on that many rookies on the defensive side of the football if you have Super Bowl aspirations. 1 or 2, sure. 1 or 2, sure you can. But he's missed time and time again on the defense when it comes to the draft. And that wasn't his only misstep. Let's look at what he decided to do this offseason. We can start on the edge. They run it back. Hassan Reddick, stud. Josh Sweat, stud. Who did you have outside of those two guys? Zero depth. Absolutely zero depth at the edge. He made the decision to bring back Derek Barnett. I know a lot of fans were upset that they cut him and now he's doing some things on Houston. But the mistake was bringing him back this year because he gave you nothing and then you cut him and released him for nothing and you had no depth on the edge and Josh Sweat hit a damn wall. Hassan Reddick hit a wall. That's the problem on the edge. Let's go to a bigger problem and talk about the linebacker position. Because now it's being reported that not only did Howie Roseman ignore the linebacker position, but he ignored TJ Edwards entirely. Didn't even call him to offer him a contract. And according to Clay Harbor, who tweeted this out over the weekend, TJ wanted to come back. And he didn't get a lot of money from Chicago, 3 years, $19.5 million. But they let TJ Edwards walk. And they tried to piecemeal it because Howie Roseman thought, I'm good enough. I'll fill the holes. I'll find somebody during training camp. And they tried to do it with Nick Morrow, who the Chicago Bears let go, Zach Cunningham, who nobody wanted, Miles Jack, who retired a week after you picked him up. Then they got really desperate and picked up Shaq Leonard. He had nothing left. And they did the same thing at safety. They let both their starters walk, Marcus Epps, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Tried again to find guys nobody wanted, Justin Evans, Terrell Edmonds. Got desperate, had to make a trade with the Titans for a guy who's lost a step. And that's not even talking about putting your money in two 30-year-old corners. And I know the argument is nobody saw Bradbury taking that big of a step back. But when you go into a season with two 30-year-old corners in the NFL, yes, there is a chance one of them's going to lose a step. And in the NFL, at the corner position, a half a step is the difference between an all-pro player and a guy who's on your bench. At the NFL, the corners can't even lose a half a step. So I'm not calling for Howie Roseman's job. I'm not saying Howie Roseman isn't a good GM. I just want him to learn from the mistakes he made this offseason. And I don't understand why we don't give Nick Sirianni any pass whatsoever, but yet Howie Roseman, God forbid we say a negative word about him with some of you fans. I don't understand that. The reason this defense was in the predicament it is in was because Howie Roseman's lack of personnel that he put on that side of the football. And the sad reality, it's not going to get much better next season. There's a lot of free agents. They're going to go into this season, as of right now, the only two guys under contract at linebacker are Nakobe Dean, Ben Van Sumeren. Everybody else is a free agent. And we probably wouldn't want him anyway. They got to make decisions at corner. What are they doing with James Bradbury? That contract makes it really tough to get out from under. Really tough. What are they doing at the other safety position? We were all hopeful for Sidney Brown. Is he going to be ready now with his torn ACL? And we'll talk more about free agency as the offseason progresses, but another name to look out for, Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick's contract, he's in the final year of his deal. So you know he wants a new contract. But the Eagles are probably also going to want to do something with him because his cap hit skyrockets this offseason. So there's no guarantee that even Reddick is back next year. So there are a lot of question marks on that side of the football. And that's personnel. And we'll get into that later because today I want to talk more about this coaching staff. We're going to be joined by Derrick Gunn shortly, but let's talk about some of these interviews that are going on right now. First one on the defensive side of the football. Well, let's talk about offense first because there's only been one name that's been floated, and it's a great name. Not necessarily a great coach, but a great name. Jim Bob Cooter. Anybody ever meet a Jim Bob? Some of our Philly crew in the house. You know any Jim Bobs from South Philly? Any Jim Bobs from the Northeast? But Jim Bob Cooter is a name that got reported by Mike Garafolo of NFL Network as potentially being an offensive coordinator candidate for the Eagles. Now, it's not hard to see why they like Jim Bob. He's currently the offensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, interestingly, even though he doesn't call plays there, it would still be considered a lateral move from offensive coordinator to offensive coordinator. So the Colts would have to approve of it. They probably would approve of it because this would be an opportunity for him to call plays. So I think something Jim Bob would be interested in. But Jim Bob currently serves as the offensive coordinator under Shane Steichen. So it's not hard to see why the Eagles are interested. He works with Shane Steichen. Back in 2021, he was a consultant with the Eagles and Shane Steichen. You also look at 2022, he worked as the passing game coordinator with Doug Peterson. So there's a lot of familiarity with Jim Bob. Now, he has called plays in the NFL before when he was the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions from 16 through 18, under Jim Caldwell for 2 years and Matt Patricia for a year. And it's hard to judge him by that because the Lions were so terrible back then. But the one concern I do have is in 2016, they had the 30th ranked rushing attack. 2017, the 32nd ranked rushing attack. 2018, the 23rd ranked rushing attack. Now, they didn't have any running backs. They stunk, so they were behind in a lot of games. But I don't love bringing in an offensive coordinator who hasn't shown me an ability to establish the run. We do not want to be one-dimensional anymore. I'm over that. So we'll see who else, if there's any other names that come up on the offensive coordinator. Now, for defensive coordinator, one of my fears was, okay, they're going to fire Sean Desai, and they're just going to say to Matt Patricia, we're going to give you another year. Well, the positive news, Matt Patricia's not under contract. And all the reports are he's going to seek other opportunities, maybe even join Bill Belichick's staff if Belichick gets the job in Atlanta. So it looks like we're getting a new DC. So thank God. But we need better personnel. But let's talk about the defensive coordinators. We know that Nick Sirianni and the Eagles organization love that Vic Fangio scheme of bend, don't break. So it was interesting to hear one of the names that came up, former Giants defensive coordinator Wink Martindale. For you Eagles fans who want them to blitz more, there's not many defensive coordinators in the league who blitz more than Wink Martindale. He was number 1 in the league in 2022, number 2 in the league this past season with the Giants when it came to blitz rate. But here's my concern. The Giants were the 27th ranked defense when it came to yards against. The 29th ranked defense in sacks. So even though they blitzed like crazy, they didn't get a lot of sacks. Now, one of the things they did do well were takeaways. Number 1 in the NFL in takeaways. But I'm not sure I want Wink Martindale. I don't think blitzing that much in today's NFL is the strategy that's going to get you far. They also interviewed or are going to interview Mike Caldwell, former linebacker with the Eagles, started out with Andy Reid. He just got fired from the Jacksonville Jaguars. But they didn't have a great defense this year either. In fact, he lost his job. And then there's also reports they're interested in talking to Ron Rivera. Again, not a great defense this year. The Commanders were the worst defense in the NFL. Now, they lacked personnel. But it's not hard to see here, and this is the thing I do like, is it looks like the Eagles are looking to go a little bit more of a veteran presence at defensive coordinator. And maybe that's what they need. A guy that's already been established who's going to get respect from these players. But we're going to talk more about it, guys. I want to take a quick break because when we get back, we're going to be joined by my man, Derrick Gunn, who tweeted out today that all signs are pointing towards Brian Johnson not coming back. So I want to talk to him about that. I want to talk to him about this defensive coordinator search, but I also want to talk to him about this story that came out today from Bleeding Green Nation about Jalen Hurts, and not only Jalen Hurts on the field, but him off the field as a leader. So stay tuned, guys. Hit that like button, hit that share button. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Derrick Gunn. Stay tuned.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, We've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back in to the Legal Hands to the Face show with Bill Colarulo. Before the break, we were taking a look at all this Eagles news. A lot of stuff happening. They should still be playing in the damn playoffs, but unfortunately the offseason ended a lot sooner than we all thought. But I want to bring in my man Derrick Gunn to break it all down for us. What's up, Gunner?
Billy, what's going on, man?
It's good to see you, man. I wish we were
Likewise.
preparing for a game, but
Likewise, brother.
it is good to see you. But let's jump in, man, because there's so much to talk about. Let's start with Nick Sirianni. So Jeff McClain reports today that Sirianni and Howie Roseman are going to do their end-of-year press conference on Wednesday. So we're all assuming he's coming back, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I understand the anger and the bitterness of a lot of people out there who wanted Sirianni fired. But when you look at the bigger picture, how many head coaches in their first stint as a head coach go to the playoffs 3 consecutive years? Second year takes them to the Super Bowl, came up 3 points short. We all know the stats historically about how difficult it is to get back to the Super Bowl. The difference between the Eagles and Kansas City right now is that Kansas City found a way to fight scrap tooth and nail to get back to their 6th consecutive AFC championship. The Eagles had a lot of obstacles along the way. They had a murderous schedule, a lot of injuries, especially in the back end. And let's face it, key players did not live up to expectation, okay, starting with the quarterback. Wasn't anywhere near the quarterback that was neck and neck for most of the season in 2022 with Patrick Mahomes for the MVP race. I mean, this kid unfortunately tailed off significantly in his overall play and mechanics. Now the Eagles have a long road to hoe in terms of fixing these problems, especially on the defensive side. It's not going to be easy because you just paid that quarterback a lot of money, which means it can your cap space a lot. I think right now they're sitting at something like $28 million in cap space. And they're going to free up some more money, especially if Kelsey officially retires, if Brandon Graham doesn't come back, if Cox goes somewhere else, they'll free up more money. How they utilize that money remains to be seen.
Yeah, right after the game and before you joined the show, I was talking about how right after the game against the Bucs, my emotions were running high. I said, hey, they got to fire him. But I took a step back, and a lot of the things you said, I said in the first segment about why you should give this guy another shot.
Right.
Now, one of the questions that a lot of fans are asking is, but it looked like the players quit on Nick Sirianni. It looked like they checked out on Nick Sirianni. Is that something you saw the last few games of the season?
I don't want to say that, but Bill, the signs were there the whole season. You can sit here and say they checked out because, yes, they lose back-to-back games to two of the worst teams in the NFL in Arizona and the Giants. But the signs were evident all season. The difference was when they were 10-1, they were finding ways to come from behind to win those games. It's not like they were dominating opponents. The luck of Vince Lombardi was on their side the first 11 games. And then all of a sudden, the laws of averages caught up with them. Injuries played a part, yes. But teams that were playing the Eagles began to better identify where to attack this defense. Offensively, they were still scoring points. The play calling, play selection, strategy wasn't the best offensively, but they still had enough talent to score points. Defensively, they just disintegrated. And the young kids we were raving about early in the season, the Jalen Carters, the Jordan Davises, the Ringos and these guys, they tailed off. I don't know if you can say hit the wall. What? It just tailed off. Everything that was going right for this team for 11 games just all of a sudden went bad for this team, the last 6 games of the season.
Yeah, I've said before, I think this team was trying to tell us who they were all season long, but because they kept winning games, we were distracted by it. But you're right, they just weren't as good as we all thought they were going to be. But I will say the one concern I have, and I'm okay with Sirianni coming back, but the one concern I did have was one of the things he did really well, because he doesn't call plays. He's not a defensive coach. So one of the things he does well as a CEO coach was he built a really strong culture. So we thought. But then as adversity started to hit this year, you started to see some cracks in that culture, some leaks from the locker room, A.J. Brown not talking to the media, some players saying some things, even Jalen Hurts saying things that were a little strange at press conferences where you take a step back. Well, what did he mean you need to be more committed? Why didn't he stick up for Nick Sirianni when he had an opportunity to when asked certain questions? So were there some cracks in that culture, in that foundation?
Look, when you're winning, every team has cracks. Here's the difference. When you're winning, nobody wants to be that sore thumb that steps outside of the box because it's Camelot when everybody's winning. When they're losing is when you truly find out how people feel, And some guys are a little bit oversensitive. That's why I've said a lot of athletes shouldn't be on social media. They spend too much time jaw-jacking with people who don't know what's going on the inside. And obviously when this team started losing is when you really started to hear some of the things, little whispers that were coming out of the locker room. And we kept hearing about how we're going to fix this. It's fixable. And the more they talked about it, the more they lost and the more frustrated they became. And all of a sudden, guys sidle up to media people they feel they're comfortable with. They know they won't dime them out. And, from our perspective is good because it gives us stuff to talk about. But from an internal situation, that's not good when you have the ranks and files slowly disintegrating and whispering things like that. I'm not going to say Nick Sirianni lost the team. I'm going to say Nick Sirianni had an extremely frustrating team because people were figuring out what they were doing better than what they used to do, and it started to catch up with them.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And there's been a lot of eyes now pointed at the quarterback, Jalen Hurts. And in fact, today, an interesting article came out from Bleeding Green Nation with regard to Jalen Hurts, both on and off the field. Let's start with the off the field stuff, because some of the things that were said were he changed when he signed the big $255 million contract. And they're made some excuses for him too, saying, hey, a lot of people are coming at you when you made that much money. So he became a little bit more less accessible, I should say, is what I think the article said.
Yeah.
Introverted. They said they want him to be a better leader, that he shuts off sometimes and he defers to A.J. Brown. And then there were 4 words used to describe him: detached, stoic, isolated, and unapproachable. But the article did go one more step and said, but they don't think he's the next Carson Wentz. They think he's different than Carson Wentz. What did you see from Jalen Hurts this season? And what are you hearing from that locker room about Jalen Hurts?
Jalen Hurts is not a bad guy. Jalen Hurts is just a quiet guy. When you listen to him at the podium, he doesn't give you a whole lot. He'll give you some quote that we chuckle at and hold on to for the rest of the week, but he's not a bad guy. He just has to learn to integrate himself more with his teammates. He's not standoffish. That's just his personality. I don't know enough about him to give a fair assessment of who he is or is not, just based on things that I'm hearing guys like him. And the article is right. This is not a Carson Wentz situation where Carson turned a lot of guys off. It's just that the organization wants him to be more of a team leader, not just a game leader. And being that team leader means embracing guys more in a locker room, embracing guys more away from the team, things of that nature. Let's face it, all guys don't hang out with each other after their job is said and done. Same way in our industry, we don't hang out with everybody we work with. It's just more magnified because it's a professional athlete. I get that. They just want him to be a little bit more open arms, let's say that, in terms of how he conducts his business on the practice field, in the locker room, so on and so forth. But he is by no stretch of the imagination a bad guy. He's just, a real low-key guy. Doesn't put a lot out there. Like, you won't see Jalen Hurts on Twitter for the wrong reason, or social media in general for the wrong reason. You won't hear Jalen Hurts going out and jaw with people on social media. That's not who he is. That's not how he handles his business. He'll just let you sit back and make assumptions about him, and it doesn't faze him one way or the other. And I understand people who want to know in the social media world that we live in, it frustrates them because they can't get under his skin, and you can't get a whole lot of information about him. He keeps a very small, close-knit circle, and kudos for him, because if you let too many people in your business, too much of your business gets out in the streets. So I understand that. He's just not one of these you-rah-rah pep talk type guys. Now, he could develop into something like that. Who knows? But he's got to get back as an athlete to the Jalen Hurts of 2022 that Shane Steichen propelled to number 2 in the voting in the MVP race. He was not that guy since Shane Steichen left. So now we're going to see what direction this team is going in terms of finding the right offensive coordinator, so to speak, to bring out the best of Jalen in 24.
And you tweeted out today, all signs are pointing towards Brian Johnson not returning. Is that what you're hearing? Zero chance that Brian Johnson comes back as offensive coordinator?
I'll say 99. I never say 100% because, things change. I've seen things change too many times in this industry. But as I tweeted out, all indications are he will not be coming back to this organization. I don't know if he's going to get a head coaching job, but Brian Johnson will be coaching football in the National Football League in some capacity in 2024. Will it be as an offensive coordinator? That remains to be seen. Could be a quarterback coach, could be a wide receiver coach, whatever he wants to do to stay relevant in the NFL. He's interviewing right now for head coaching jobs. If those don't pan out, next level is OC. Next level after that is position coach. Brian Johnson is a good football coach. He was put in a situation where he didn't flourish in 2023. So I wonder if a number of teams would shy away from him in terms of being an offensive coordinator. But Brian Johnson also knows that if he doesn't get an OC job, he needs to stay relevant on the offensive side of the football in some capacity, and his turn will come again. It may not be in 24. May have to wait until 25 if he doesn't get an OC job right now. But he'll still be in football in some capacity.
So the only interesting thing, though, is Wednesday, they're going to do this end-of-the-year press conference, and they're going to be asked about Brian Johnson. So if he hasn't been hired as a head coach somewhere by Wednesday, are we just going to get he's still the offensive coordinator of this football team answer?
That's interesting when it comes to Howie. Howie doesn't like to put anything out there until he's ready, and usually gives it to guys at the NFL Network or ESPN. I think if there's a chance that Brian Johnson comes back to the staff, it will not be as the OC. It will be in some other capacity, whether it's wide receivers, whether it's, it could be an assistant offensive coordinator. He won't be the main offensive coordinator out there. There's a lot of talent out there in the market in terms of OCs that the Eagles could pick from. It's just a matter of waiting and see exactly why and who that they're pursuing. You have to remember, just because names jump out there, for whatever reason, there are a lot of coaches that might say Philadelphia is just not a fit for me, and then they have to move on to plan B, C, or D. You look at how it happened last year when Jonathan Gannon all of a sudden at the last minute took the Arizona job. And we heard a number of coaches that the Eagles were interested in and already taking jobs elsewhere. And then, oh, by the way, who's available? Sean Desai / Matt Patricia. See, so the Eagles have enough talent out there right now to pick from, but look at how many teams out there are looking to build new staffs right now. You got 7 or 8 teams. So if I'm a coach looking for a job as an OC, I'm thinking of two things. Number one, what's the best element for my family? Number one, two, who's offering the most money? Is where I'm thinking about going conducive to what I'm going to do? And number three, which might be number one, what kind of voice will I have in terms of bringing in my own style? We've heard so many stories about Howie and Jeffrey wanting to be hands-on in terms of picking coaches, having input into the style of play. And that's all right. It's Jeffrey Lurie's toy. He can have a say in anything that he wants. The one guy I would love to see come here, but I don't know how much of a fit he will be, is Mike Caldwell. I love Mike Caldwell. I've known him since he broke into the league as a rookie. Mike Caldwell is a good defensive mind, but my concern is Mike Caldwell might be a yes man to this organization. They've had too many yes men in this organization. And that's not a knock against Caldwell. Caldwell just wants to do his job to the best of his ability and not make waves. If you bring in like the likes of a Wink Martindale or Ron Rivera, they're going to have their own personality and own style, and they're going to come in here with the understanding, I don't want any interference. Are you going to let me do what I need to do to turn this thing around? If Lurie and Howie Roseman say yes, they'll come here. If not, they're not going to come here. Those are not yes men. They've been in the game too long. They don't need to be told what to do. They've had success in other stops, as we've seen. Howie Roseman has to get away from the Jonathan Gannons, the Shane Steichens, the Sean Desais, the coaches that they can kind of string along and have unlimited input and suggestions to. They need coaches to come in here with a veteran presence who can help turn this thing around sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I did think it was interesting. In addition to Caldwell, you mentioned Wink Martindale, Ron Rivera.
Yeah.
2 guys who are veteran guys, but even more interesting to me, Wink Martindale likes to blitz, and that's something we have not seen from a Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator. They don't feel that the way you win football games, or at least this is how they felt in the past, was by blitzing. They are that bend but don't break Vic Fangio style of defense.
Right.
Could you see a guy like Wink Martindale actually being brought in to this city with a guy blitzing number 2 in the NFL this year?
What do the Eagles want? For the last 2 years, we've watched a Jonathan Gannon defense, a Sean Desai / Matt Patricia defense. If you look at the defenses that are playing in the National Football League, look at Baltimore's defense. Look at Kansas City's defense. Look at the 49ers defense. They're bringing pressure from all different areas. You have to put pressure on today's quarterback. You cannot allow him to stand back there and count 1,003, 1,004, 1,005, because eventually, even if you have 3-man routes and 6 guys in the back end trying to cover, somebody's going to come free when you let a quarterback have that much time to throw the football. You have to force a quarterback to make his decision sooner. Hey, look, teams started blitzing Jalen Hurts. Look what happened when you blitz Jalen Hurts. You flush him out of the pocket, you force him to make throws sooner than he wants to, or he throws it out of bounds. That's what you have to do in today's football. You cannot let the quarterback already has enough advantages and enough protection thanks to the change of league rules. But there's still ways to put heat on a quarterback and make him speed up his thought process. Those are the type of defenses that are still playing right now that you want to see in Philadelphia.
And I see somebody in the chat mentioned Denard Wilson, obviously the D-backs coach that a lot of the D-backs wanted to get this job last season. Doesn't happen. They move on. He goes to the Ravens. Any chance a guy like Denard Wilson would come back to Philadelphia to be the DC?
Well, fences can be mended, but Denard Wilson, I thought Denard Wilson would have been the perfect guy. If you had Denard Wilson running this defense, you would have had a much more aggressive defense in 2023. But there were personality clashes. And you know what? Broken fences can be mended. But I don't know if this fence can be mended between these two. Anything's possible, Bill. I don't see it happening when it comes to Denard Wilson. I really don't.
And the only name we've heard on the offensive side of the football, or at least that I've heard, Jim Bob Cooter. Jim Bob from South Philly.
Cooter, yep.
Best name going right now. Have you heard anything? Any other offensive coordinator candidates? Have you heard anything?
No, they're keeping it really close to the vest. You know, when Howie Roseman and they get behind closed doors, when they don't want something to get out, they keep a lot of things close to the vest. And they don't want a lot to get out right now because, as we know, anybody the Eagles are going after, so are other teams. Or if it's identified the Eagles are interested in them, all of a sudden other teams are interested in, well, I mean, think about it. There's 7 teams out there looking to build new staffs. And everybody wants what you're looking at or what you have, you know. So the Eagles are going to play this cloak and dagger game as much as they could to keep other teams off their necks. And I understand that. You know, it's very little less secret anymore in the NFL. You know, you try to gain an upper hand and advantage any way, shape, or form you can. And eventually it's going to come out. We know it's going to come out. Nothing stays secret forever. But the Eagles are hoping by the time something comes out, they will already have a deal in place with whoever they're going after.
Yeah, they usually, whenever things get released, it's because they wanted it to get released, right? So, but let me ask you, because in my opinion, Jalen Hurts had opportunities to defend Nick Sirianni. Now, we saw Fletcher Cox come out and support Sirianni pretty strongly in the locker room. Jason Kelsey supported him pretty strongly. Brandon Graham on his show supported him pretty strongly. It felt to me that Jalen Hurts had a couple of opportunities throughout the season to support Sirianni, and he didn't really do it. Now, do you chalk that up to this is just how Jalen Hurts is at press conferences because we know he doesn't like to give us a lot? Or was there anything going on between Nick and Jalen?
I'm not going to read between the lines, Bill. I don't think there's anything going on. Maybe Jalen didn't answer the question to our satisfaction. You're right. On one hand, if you really support your head coach, you emphatically come out and say it the way Fletcher Cox did and other players as well. But, you know, Jalen Hurts, as we know him, is a very calculated individual in terms of what he said. I know there was frustration on Jalen's part with the offense, and I know there was frustration on the coach's part with Jalen because he continuously changed plays at the line of scrimmage. You know, I had a player tell me, as I told you guys on the postgame show and as I put on Twitter over a month ago, when they played that game against Dallas, players were frustrated because the comment was, look at how quick Dallas gets the bleeping ball out of their hands. Our routes take too long to develop. And sure enough, how many underneath routes did you see the Eagles throw in the last 6-7 games? You know, especially when 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, they're going for the home run ball. They're going for the 15, 20-yard gain. You're playing right into a defense's hands. You look at a lot of successful offenses. Look at how Kansas City utilizes the underneath routes. Look how Brock Purdy utilizes those underneath routes. Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, how they those are killing routes. Those are defensive killer routes. You know, but when you stand back there and you need 7 yards and you're going for 15 or 20, you're giving a lot of teams time to converge in the football because the ball's in the air a lot longer. You know, you got to kill these guys underneath. What's the rule? We'll take what you give us. Eagles didn't do that well enough. Yeah, guys running wide open in the middle of the field, you know, at times, and Jalen missed them because he's looking for the deep ball. He's looking for that home run hit, you know, and teams started to realize that. You played right into the hands of a defense when you really could have hurt a lot of defenses and possibly won a few more games. They didn't do it. They didn't do it.
Yeah, you talk about Brock Purdy. I mean, one of the things they do so well is getting the ball in their playmakers' hands in space, not necessarily deep routes.
on crossing routes.
Them in space, let them get that yards after catch. That's something that
Kansas City has perfected that. Andy Reid has perfected that. You know, San Francisco has perfected that. Baltimore does a good job with that as well. And you're going to see Detroit. You know, Detroit uses a lot of crossing routes. All these teams still standing offensively utilize the crossing routes because they have speed to utilize it. The Eagles have speed to utilize it. They just handcuff the speed they had.
Yeah, I'm looking at the stats right now, and San Francisco, number 1 yards after catch average at 6.6. Kansas City Chiefs, number 2. Eagles didn't do a great job this year with that, that's for sure. So hopefully we'll start hearing some other names coming out for this offensive coordinator. I got one more question for you. I mentioned some of those veterans, Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, your buddy Brandon Graham. Who's coming back next year? Any of them?
I would say if I had my druthers, in terms of who's coming back, I would say it's up to Jason Kelce whether or not he wants to come back. Brandon Graham has already said he wants to come back for one more swan song. But if you get a new defensive coordinator, that defensive coordinator, if he has a say in what he wants to do, he has to understand, because Brandon Graham will be 36 in April. Brandon Graham would still be good for 20-25% of the snaps. But is that enough for a new defensive coordinator? Is that what they want? With Brandon Graham at this stage, it's not about money. It's about riding off into the sunset on his own terms. The Eagles have been very loyal to Brandon Graham. Very rarely does a defensive lineman get to finish his entire career with the same organization. That's a rarity. And Brandon knows that. Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie have a soft spot for Brandon Graham. Could he be a viable entity in whoever's defense it is next season? Yes. To what degree remains to be seen. But he could be. And let's face it, he has unlimited value in terms of teaching up younger players who are already in the league, who are still growing, and a new crop of players who will arrive later this year in the draft. So there's a lot of value for Brandon Graham in terms of a player and a leader. The Eagles have to decide, is that enough for them moving in a new direction coming up for 2024?
Yeah, a lot of questions this offseason. In addition to those veterans, a lot of personnel decisions, but hopefully we'll talk again soon. Last thing as you're headed out the door, who represents the NFC in the Super Bowl, who represents the AFC, and who wins the whole damn thing?
I think both games are going to be tremendous games. Kansas City at Baltimore is going to be a tremendous game. You have two quarterbacks there that can scramble. We know Lamar Jackson is Houdini with his legs. Patrick Mahomes is Houdini because you never know when he's going to throw the ball. Underhanded, overhanded. See, Lamar Jackson takes off to run. Patrick Mahomes scrambles to buy time until somebody frees up. You look at this other matchup. You got two offenses that can score at will. San Francisco's defense to me is much better than Detroit's, but Detroit's defense is good enough to get a few necessary stops to get the ball back into the offense's hands. But because San Francisco and Baltimore are playing at home, I expect to see a repeat from earlier this season when Baltimore went into San Francisco and embarrassed San Francisco in their own backyard. So I'm going to say Niners and Ravens in the upcoming Super Bowl.
I'll disagree with you. I'm rooting for the Lions, but I don't disagree the Niners win that game, but we will see. Gunner, I appreciate you, my man. I love that you made some time for us tonight. Everybody loves hearing from DGunn. So
absolutely,
hope
brother.
all is well, my friend.
Yep. Thank you, brother. Anytime.
We'll talk soon.
All right.
My man DGunn, always good getting to talk to Gunner. But we'll see, man. A lot of question marks. A lot of question marks this offseason. Obviously, they got to figure out who the offensive coordinator is, who the defensive coordinator is. But then we're going to start getting into the personnel, and we'll talk more this offseason. But there are a lot of question marks, not only with positions that need to be filled, but also with some current players on the roster who may need new contracts. But we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, and as Jody Mack likes to say, put a bow on the show. And like we end every Legal Hands to the Face show, a little Eagles trivia. So stay tuned, guys. Hit that like button for me. We'll be back, and then we'll finalize the show. Stuttering here today. Finalize the show. So stay tuned.
Any professional sports coach will tell you there's no substitution for preparation. At Malamut & Associates, that is a tenet by which we live. We prepare from day one for victory. Anything less is not acceptable.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia Dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday. Watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
EAGLES, Eagles.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back in to the Legal Hands to the Face show. Just joined by my man, DGunn. Always love getting to talk to DGunn. Obviously, we haven't seen much of DGunn lately. He's dealing with some family issues, as you guys know, but always good when he can make some time to jump on the show. But there are a lot of question marks, so we're going to be talking about it all offseason, guys. Make sure you're following me on all your social media platforms because we are posting content all day long about our Philadelphia Eagles. And once we get all these coaching decisions, we'll break it all down. I'm hoping that we start to hear some other names for offensive coordinator and for defensive coordinator. You know, you heard me talk to DGunn. Wink Martindale's a name out there. Mike Caldwell's a name out there. Ron Rivera is a name out there. But let's just take a look. And I started to talk about this before DGunn joined the show. I know everybody wants more aggression. They want more blitzing. But put that aside for a second, and let's just look at what these defenses did for Wink Martindale and Mike Caldwell and Ron Rivera. Wink Martindale, Giants, 27th in the league in yards against this year, 19th in passing yards against, 29th in sacks, 29th in rushing defense, 26th in points against, number 1 in takeaways. But outside of that, not a very good defense this year. And I see Daz in the chat talking about Wink Martindale when he was the DC of the Ravens. Absolutely. So how much of it is personnel? But the issue is Eagles don't have a great defensive roster, guys. So I know we're talking about personnel. Well, whoever the DC that comes in here, they're going to have to do some things with probably limited personnel. I don't see the Eagles being able to fix every single issue on the defense this season because there are so many questions with that personnel. So is Wink Martindale, if he came in here, going to have a roster more similar to what the Giants had this past season or what the Baltimore Ravens had back in, what was it, 2016, 2018? You guys probably know in the chat. I don't have it in front of me. But then let's look at Mike Caldwell. Gets fired by Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jaguars. 22nd in yards against. 26th in passing yards against. 25th in sacks. 9th against the run. 17th in points against. 10th in takeaways. Not great either. There's a reason why Caldwell lost his job with the Jags. Let's look at Ron Rivera. Now, he was the head coach, So a little bit different, but you look at the Washington Commanders, who also had a depleted roster, 32nd in yards, 32nd in passing yards, 26th in sacks, 27th in rushing yards against, 32nd in points, 26th in takeaways. But Rivera, I'd be willing to give the benefit of the doubt. He was the head coach. They completely depleted his roster. You're talking about depleted rosters. They basically traded everybody away. So out of those three guys, if I had to go with one of them, I'm probably leaning Ron Rivera. That would probably be my choice. But if it was really up to me, I'd be doing everything in my power to get Jesse Minter from the University of Michigan. They looked at Minter last season. Get Jesse Minter in here. Now, if Jim Harbaugh gets a head coaching job, he's probably taking Minter with him. But that's who I would want. That would be my choice for DC. But if you guys are in the chat, let me know what you're thinking as far as defensive coordinators. And then you go to the offensive side of the football. Who knows, man? We talked about Jim Bob. You're not hearing anything else from any other names. DGunn said they're keeping it pretty close to the vest on this one. So I don't know who they're going to be able to get. And the tough thing is, remember, teams can block lateral moves. So it's hard to say, hey, I want that offensive coordinator. You're not going to get them. So you may have to go with a passing game coordinator or a quarterback's coach. Or maybe they get a guy like Eric Bieniemy if he doesn't get retained by the Commanders. That may not be a bad name. So we'll see what happens. I see Paul Mancini saying, look at Leslie Frazier, Lovie Smith, Phil Snow, and Ron Rivera. And I see Brian Bidding talking about offensive coordinator, Frank Reich. Frank Reich potentially. We know he's available. We know if there's anybody who could talk him into coming back to coaching, it's Nick Sirianni. So could that work out? So we'll see. We will see. And we're not going to do a really deep dive into the roster right now. We'll continue to do that as the offseason progresses. But when I say there's a lot of decisions, I mean, just listen to the guys who are going to be free agents. Okay, just listen to this list. Olamide Zaccheaus, Quez Watkins, Albert O, Jack Stoll, Justin Evans, DeAndre Swift, Boston Scott, Rashad Penny, Marcus Mariota, Braden Mann, Nick Morrow, Sean Bradley, Zach Cunningham, Shaq Leonard, Opeta, Driscoll, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Jason Kelsey. Every one of those guys is a free agent. So there's a lot of decisions to be made. Now, I don't think losing Quez Watkins and Olamide Zaccheaus is that big of a loss. The Eagles need to upgrade the wide receiver 3 this offseason, without a doubt. A lot of us, including me, wanted them to upgrade the wide receiver 3 this past offseason. I didn't want to see them come into this year with Quez Watkins, and unfortunately they did. But they need to upgrade that position. Now, Jack Stoll is also a free agent. I want to see them upgrade the tight end 2 this year. Because when they came out in 12 personnel with Dallas Goedert and the other tight end in their 12 personnel package, it was either Jack Stoll or Grant Calcaterra. And the problem is Jack Stoll can block really well. He can't catch. He's not good in the receiving game. Grant Calcaterra, complete opposite. Really good in the receiving game, can't block. You need that dual threat tight end so that when you come out in 12 personnel, it really puts the pressure on the defense because they don't know what you're going to do. So would love to see them upgrade wide receiver 3. Would love to see them upgrade the backup tight end, especially because Goddard hasn't been able to stay healthy 2 years in a row. And then you look at that offensive line, some other question marks. If Kelsey retires, who's your center? Cam Jurgens, most likely. Well, now, who's your right guard? Is Tyler Steen ready? So, questions along that offensive line. Who's your running back? Do you try to re-sign DeAndre Swift? DeAndre Swift's going to be a free agent. I'm sure he's going to want to get paid. Running backs don't last long in the NFL. So this is his shot. He may not get a shot at another contract. So he's going to go out there and try to get as much as he possibly can. So we'll see what happens there. But to me, those are minor questions. compared to the questions you have on defense. Because you don't have linebackers. Can we go into this season relying on the Kobe Dean again? Look where that got us this year. Who's your other safety? Even if you believe in Reed Blankenship, which I know a few of you guys don't believe in Reed Blankenship, but even if you assume Reed Blankenship is the answer at one safety, who's your other safety? What are you doing at the slot corner position? Can you bring back Avonte Maddox? He's got a $9 million cap hit this year. It balloons from $4 million this past season to $9 million next season. Can you truly bring back a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy his entire career on the final year of his deal on a $9 million cap hit? What do you have in Zach McPherson? We didn't see him this year. He tore his Achilles in training camp. A lot of question marks, guys, and we'll continue to break it down. But Howie Roseman's got his work cut out for him this offseason on that defensive side of the ball. No doubt about it. So real quickly, guys, before we get into the trivia question of the night, tomorrow, be sure to check me out on the Philly Sports Power Hour. We're live every day on the JAKIB Sports Network at 10 o'clock, and I've been filling in on Sports Take with Rob Ellis. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by Joe Santoliquito, the reporter who wrote the Bleeding Green Nation article about Jalen Hurts. So tune in tomorrow, 10 o'clock, Philly Sports Power Hour. We roll straight into Sports Take, and our guest, Joe Santoliquito, will talk to him a little bit about that Jalen Hurts article. And Andy Reid is back in the AFC Championship game. 6th straight time. And I posted a video on my Instagram today basically saying, look, every time Andy Reid has success, there's fans that come out of the woodwork talking about the Eagles never should have fired Andy Reid. And I love Andy Reid, one of the best to ever do it. But you can't rewrite history. When they moved on from Andy Reid, it was time to move on from Andy Reid. He was 4-12 the season they fired him. He was 8-8 the season before that. He hadn't won a playoff game in 5 years. He had just lost his son during training camp. He needed a change. He was here for 14 years. It was time for a change. And I'm glad it worked out for Andy, but we can't rewrite history. It was time to move on. But let me give you a little trivia today, Philadelphia Eagles trivia. Watching the games this weekend, we saw a lot of missed field goals. A lot of missed field goals that came back to haunt these teams. So the question today, who holds the record in Philadelphia Eagles franchise history for the most consecutive field goals made? Most consecutive field goals made without missing. Who holds the record? Give you guys a few seconds in the chat to see if you get this. Who holds the record? Most consecutive field goals made in Philadelphia Eagles franchise history. Daz says it's got to be Elliott. It is not. Jake Elliott is number 2 with 20 consecutive. David Akers all the way down at number 4 with 17 consecutive. The record for the most consecutive field goals in Philadelphia Eagles franchise history is held by Alex Henry in 2012, 22 in a row. 22 field goals in a row. Alex Henry, 2012. So that is the trivia question of the day. Hopefully, guys, I will see you tomorrow on the Philly Sports Power Hour at 10 o'clock. But make sure you're following me on all social media platforms. Some big news coming your way this offseason. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be announcing that shortly. But all good. A lot of questions to answer this offseason. We'll be following it all like we always do. But thanks for spending this night with me. Love spending some time with my Legal Hands to the Face crew. Hit that like button on the way out. Hit that share button. And as always, guys, go Birds.
Go for the polls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.